The United States is one of the wealthiest nations in the world, yet nearly 15% of the people in this country are officially counted as living in poverty. Why? The why rests on several different things. The wages are not equal. You have women making much less than men do. The wage increase for everyone across the board is not matching what the cost of living is. Government funding isn't matching the rising cost of living. There are households with 2 working adults who are still not making enough to get by, but yet they don't meet the poverty guidelines either. The poverty line is lower now, so we have people struggling who are not meeting the guidelines for assistance. Those individuals are losing their home. Children are going without healthy meals or meals at all. No health care because they can't afford the insurance, and if they can't afford co-pays. On page 185 of our textbook, Siegel tells us that there was no child care back in the 60s, so there were no child care costs. That's not necessarily taken into consideration now, that the government is not looking at the rising cost of the child care. The public transportation was the norm then, and that is not the norm now. Back in the 60s, we had factories, we had different things that were all in clusters, and they're not that way anymore. It's not easy for people to walk or use buses to get to and from. On page 187, Siegel tells us that the change in living costs in the 50 years since the creation of the poverty threshold means that the absolute line below which people are officially recognized as poor is proportionally much lower than when it was developed. If a new line were to be constructed based on the typical cost of food in relation to other costs of living and took into account the dramatic increase in child care and health care, many millions more people would be officially counted as poor in this country. This is not an individual failure. The poverty in this country is not an individual failure. This is a system failure.